Okay, I think we can get started. So hello, everybody, and thank you so much for being here on this very snowy afternoon in Nashville. It is the single snowiest day I have seen since moving to Nashville almost 10 years ago. I'm excited and extremely humbled, frankly, to introduce the second event in Rafa Institute's Unthinking Prisons panel series. My name is Eric Ritter, and I am a social justice fellow at Rafa Institute here in Nashville, as well as a visiting scholar and lecturer in the philosophy department at Vanderbilt University. For those of you who may not yet be aware of Rafa Institute, well, you should be. Rafa is an organization dedicated to confronting and solving the root causes of social harm. Among our ongoing projects is a restorative justice diversion partnership with the Davidson County Juvenile Court, Judge Calloway's court is here on this panel, as well as a brand new partnership with the Metropolitan Department Housing Authority to create high quality early learning opportunities for those in Nashville without such access. Shout out to my friend Erica Ward for her work there. And to learn more about Rafa Institute and any of these projects, please visit rafa.org, raphah.org. Today is the second of at least 3 discussions we are hosting, and the first last week was on the intersections of poverty and mass incarceration. We were blessed to have Dawn Diener of the Choosing Justice Initiative, as well as Khadijah Babb of the Davidson County District Attorney's Office, in addition to Travis Claybrooks, CEO of Rafa Institute, and Ashley Sellers, Restorative Justice Director of Rafa. That conversation will soon be available on our website, along with a future recording of this one, and we would encourage you all to check it out. So that brings me finally to today's panel. We've called it Young People and Justice Systems, New Movements, New Horizons. We have, I think, an incredible opportunity today to gather momentum and have a community-wide discussion about how we can, frankly, update our juvenile justice systems to reflect the growing national consensus around the need for reform. But even more incredible, I think, is that we have the opportunity to hear today from experts who are in positions of authority and power in our community and who have the resources to make these changes that we need. So we need your help, though, and that's part of our goal for today's discussion. I will disappear in 30 seconds, in a minute, until the very end of the panel, when I will return with a very brief request for you all to share with us anonymously something that was said tonight, which you'll be carrying forward in your life, today. Whether a new fact, an attitude, a new horizon of understanding. We'll then collect those mementos and send them back out to the group as a kind of monument to this discussion. With that, it is my humble pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Judge Bell. Judge Rachel L. Bell is a third-generation native Nashvilleian and proud graduate of Hillsborough Comprehensive High School, where she was a star basketball player. Judge Bell received an NCAA Division I women's basketball scholarship to Auburn, finished her collegiate career at the University of Memphis, where she went on to earn her law degree. I haven't told Judge Bell that I'm actually a UConn fan. We'll maybe have to have that discussion later. But in 2014, Judge Bell was elected by her peers to be the presiding judge over the Davidson County General Sessions Court for a 1-year term and re-elected to a second term in August. Prior to her election to that court, Judge Bell was the managing partner of Bell and Kinslow, and with offices in Bordeaux, North Nashville, West Nashville, Hermitage, and Memphis. Judge Bell's won numerous awards, and most of you may already know her, so I'll be brief here, but I'll just say a couple things. Shortly after taking the bench, Judge Bell started working on pilot projects to establish the General Sessions Music City Community Court, as well as the CARE Court, things that will be topics of our discussion today. She's a leader in the emerging adult justice field, leader in the community, and we're so grateful to have her as moderator. That's it. I will now turn it over, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. We can talk about UConn later, but basketball is my first love, will always be my first love. I still get a new basketball every year. I've got one for outdoors and one for indoors. And then for Christmas, my wife got me a dribble up. So I'm sorry, but we can talk about UConn later. That is a good team, but you know, we'll pivot. Let's go back to what we're here for today. But you know, I'm excited about being the moderator. So thank you for this opportunity today. You know, the topic today is young people, justice systems, new movements, and new horizons. And so, to be frankly honest, we're going to go right into new movements and new horizons. But I'm going to introduce our panelists to you today. I'm going to start out with the honorable, the great, the leading the way with Judge Calloway. She's doing a phenomenal job. Very proud of her. But Judge Calloway, she is a native of Louisville, Kentucky. Ali. A lot of great people coming from there, huh? She's the greatest. But then she moved here to Nashville, Tennessee. We've been, you know, honored with her presence here in Nashville, Tennessee. She attended Vanderbilt Law School, received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Communications, as well in her Doctor of Jurisprudence. After graduating from law school, she also worked as a public defender in the adult system, as well as in the juvenile system. In January 2004, she was appointed by the Honorable Judge Betty Adams Green to a position as a juvenile court magistrate and served in that position until November 2013, when she then announced that she was going to run for a juvenile court judge. And she is the first African-American female judge to serve, or just African-American judge to serve in that position as well. And her campaign slogan was "Leading the Way" with Judge Calloway, and she was successful in her endeavor. She was elected and she was sworn into office for an 8-year term on August 28, 2014. Judge Calloway also serves as an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt University, where she teaches trial advocacy, and she's an adjunct professor at Belmont College of Law, where she teaches juvenile law. She uses her unique combination of humor, passion, and she sings a little bit. We're gonna have a competition, but she sings a little bit. We've been talking about that. And her judicial wisdom to change the way we look at justice in the United States of America. So welcome, Judge Calloway, as one of our panelists to this conversation today. And then we're gonna go to another phenomenal, amazing woman working in civil rights, Lael Chester. She is also an attorney. She is the director of the Emerging Adult Justice Project at Columbia University's Justice Lab. She's a graduate of Barnard College and Harvard Law School, where she worked as the Albert Martin Sachs Clinical Fellow at the Criminal Justice Institute at Harvard, and then was also the Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Division of Massachusetts Attorney General's Office. So she's a bad sister. But for 12 years, she served as an executive director of Citizens for Juvenile Justice. She has a passion about working in this space. This is a statewide nonprofit dedicated to improving the juvenile justice system. She led a successful Justice for Kids campaign, ending the practice in Massachusetts of automatically prosecuting and sentencing all 17-year-olds as adults, regardless of severity of the offense. As a research fellow at Harvard Kennedy School Program in Criminal Justice Policy and Management, Lael focused her research on emerging adult justice, focusing on ages 18 to 25. And now she continues this work at the Columbia University Justice Lab. In addition to conducting cutting-edge research and supporting states with systematic reform, she organizes the Emerging Adult Justice Learning Community, a first of its kind, carefully orchestrating collaborative learning environment that brings together researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and advocates from around the country to increase learning and policy innovation in this new field. And as we get into this conversation, it is our hope that she will be coming here to Nashville, Tennessee, Davidson County, to work with us in this space. But we'll have a charge of action, a call to action with a response that I'm sure is going to be a yes. Yes, we can, and yes, we will at the end of this conversation. But one of the people on the panel that has all too well experienced exactly what we're going to be talking about today, and it's going to tell us we shouldn't even try to do this work. We must do this work. I believe try is not even in his vocabulary. It's not in my vocabulary. I don't think it's in Judge Calloway's vocabulary. It's not in Ms. Chester's vocabulary to try to do anything. We are going to do this work. We are going to have a new movement and new horizons in helping young people in the justice systems. But now I introduce you to Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric Alexander is one of many African-American men in this country who was tried as an adult for a crime committed when he was under the age of 18 years old. An act that helped him avoid life without parole sentence at the age of 17. He accepted two 25-year sentences with a chance for parole to be served concurrently in the Tennessee Department of Corrections. Eric was paroled in 2004 after serving 10 years. After his release, he began to volunteer in alternative schools for students with behavioral issues. He joined AmeriCorps Community Health Corps and assisted in establishing full-service medical clinics inside of local high schools that provided health care to poor and underserved students and families. Eric became an independent vendor for the public school system. He facilitated trainings for school staff and campus security that offered strategies in identifying gang members and providing intervention for them and their families. He partnered with the Juvenile Detention Center and local organizations to provide services for students with trauma-related issues. The goal of this coalition and providers was to keep youth out of the juvenile justice system. As program director for YMCA of Middle Tennessee, Eric operated a 3-point program that addressed the socio-emotional development in students with behavioral and academic performance issues. Eric now serves as the senior advocate for the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, an organization that seeks to abolish life without parole and other extreme sentences for children. In his role, he speaks to groups throughout the country in support of public education and legislative advocacy efforts that would help create a justice system that holds children accountable in age-appropriate ways, accounts for exposure to their trauma, and prepares them for reintegration into our society. Eric is a founding member of the Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network. He also works with formerly incarcerated youth to help engage them deeply and strategically in the movement for the fair sentencing and treatment of children. So in today's conversation, we have a judge that has the power and the jurisdiction. We have a thought change agent, an attorney, a bad sister working in this space, all the way hailing from Columbia and Harvard. And then we have an individual that not only is working in this space, but has been affected by this space that we're going to dismantle, reimagine, restructure, and talk about on today. So I'm going to open it up. If anybody has any questions, if you have anything that you would like to share, please put it on our Facebook Live at Rafa Institute. Please put it in the chat. They'll get me that information, and we will, when it comes time for our fireside chat, we will start discussing and trying to answer your questions. But Judge Calloway, you put this together. This is one of your pilot projects, one of your initiatives, something you're passionate about. What is your goal for today's conversation? What is your goal when we say young people in justice systems, new movements, new horizons? What are we leading the way in? What are we leading the way in today?
So thank you, Judge Bell, for the questions, and thank you, Rafa Institute, and all those who are here. My ultimate goal, first and foremost, is for me to retire and not have a need for juvenile incarceration ever in this whole entire country. That's my ultimate goal, that we as a country recognize that we've got to do better with our juveniles and we have to do better with juvenile justice. When I think about the history of where we are, where we came from, it wasn't until the early 1800s when there was a push to separate juveniles from adult facilities and to take them out of those facilities. It wasn't until early 1800s that we recognized that you should not be incarcerated at the same facilities as adults. And then it really wasn't until the late 1800s, almost 1900, when three women in Chicago or in the Illinois area determined that we should have a total separate system for our youth because brain development, because they don't think like adults, they don't act like adults, and we don't expect them to do that. And so that was really the start of juvenile courts and the juvenile court system. And it was a good start. Unfortunately, it was in the 80s or the 90s, the late 80s and the early 90s, when we decided that because juvenile crime was rising during that time period, I think it had more to do with the war on drugs than anything. But because of that, we decided to label our youth as, super predators and horrible terms that don't really characterize who our youth really are, that we went backwards and we decided that it was okay to house certain youth with adults. And it was during that time period, particularly young Black men, that were the ones that were suffering the most from that. And that continues until this day. It is so difficult and so disturbing to know that a young person who doesn't think like adults, who doesn't make decisions like adults, who doesn't can't drink like adults, who can't vote like adults, who can't rent a car, can't rent a apartment like an adult can. None of those things they can do because we recognize the science that says they shouldn't be able to do these things. However, when it comes to the criminal justice system, we say, oh, no, they did an adult crime, so they should serve adult time. And that is where we've got to make a difference and got to do better. And that's why I'm so excited to be with Eric and Lil, and I cannot wait until at least in Tennessee that we make a change in our statutes, but hopefully nationwide that we do a better job of treating our youth as they are youth.
But Judge Calloway, I love it when elected officials, because you get a term of office. When you get a term of office and you continue to run for re-election, you must have an agenda, right? You have to have a vision for your work. You got to leave, I call it a legacy. You've got to leave a blueprint, and then also your fingerprint. And so I like what you're saying, that by the time you retire, it is your hope that there's no more juvenile incarceration. So we want to reimagine, this space. And Lael, you have been reimagining this for a long time. Not only have you been thinking about it, you've been doing the work. You've seen jurisdictions across this world, this country, that have looked at this differently and said, we need to look at this a little differently. We were prepping for this, this week, and we had the conversation about the cognitive ability of children. And like just Calloway just said, kids can't even get off they don't get off their parents' insurance till they're 26. They can't rent a car till they're 25. They can't drink till they're 21. They can't vote till they're 18. But here we are incarcerating individuals from age, I guess in Tennessee, you can be incarcerated at 7 years old, all the way to 18. And then, we've got a court now in Nashville, diversionary court, ages 18 to 30. But Mayo, you were telling us about an opportunity potentially for a hybrid court. What jurisdictions, what model do you think we could potentially bring here to Nashville, Tennessee?
Yeah, thank you so much, and so thrilled to be part of this conversation. Judge Calloway talked about how in the late 1800s, the small group of women, right, decided that based on instinct, personal experience, societal norms, that kids were not many adults and they needed a separate rehabilitative system, right? And they were ahead of their time, man. They were ahead of their time. But what society did was they did set up, every state quickly created a juvenile justice system. They didn't know what age. Was it 16, 17, 18? There was actually a period with one jurisdiction that had different ages for the different genders, right? Like maybe girls grow up faster, boys grow up faster, right? They were incredibly progressive, ahead of their time, but they didn't have a lot of research to back them up. But the point now is we have the research. We have research in neurobiology, developmental psychology, and sociology. And we now know that youth are not mini adults in really important ways, and important ways that are relevant to the justice system, right? So adolescents and emerging adults up to age 25 minimum, and it may be, you know, for a lot of people, especially young people with trauma, they share the same characteristics as their younger peers, a 14, a 15, a 16-year-old, right? They are impulsive. They're highly influenced by their peers. They are risk takers. In fact, risk taking is the hallmark of emerging adulthood. It peaks at 19 generally, right? That is their business, to be risk takers. And in fact, that's actually important when you grow up, to leave home, to start a career, because you have to be able to take some risk. So evolution wise, it's a good thing, but it's also relevant to the justice system. But we also know that most young people grow up and out of crime. By the mid 20s, if given the opportunity to do so, they're going to leave that behind them. They're going to transition into healthy adulthood, and they're going to move on. But ironically, the justice system, one, doesn't recognize that, right? There's always some magic birthday, could be 16, 17, now it's generally 18. Nothing happens on that magic birthday. It takes months, years, right? And they throw in the emerging adults, and actually some of the under 18-year-olds, right, just into the adult system, right? And they somehow think this is going to work out, and they have to then go through the trauma of the adult system, which interferes with healthy development, right? So ironically, we want to be supporting youth, moving them into adulthood, but we saddle them with all the collateral consequences of an adult record, and then say, they can't get a job, or they can't get stable housing, right? That should not be a surprise. We have set them up for failure. So what this all means is that there's really this new movement in the United States to think about what is youth. Let's not be ridiculous and limit who youth are. We know that goes up to now to at least the mid 20s, right? So when we set drinking age, legalizing marijuana, we don't set it at 18. No state does it, right? It's 21, because we recognize those distinct developmental differences. And then we think, well, they're doing so badly in the adult system. They have the highest recidivism rates of any age group. They have by far the worst racial disparities. And that's saying something, because you know how poor and troubling and stark the racial disparities are, right? For 18 and 19-year-olds are more than 12 times, Black 18, 19-year-olds, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white peers. I mean, those numbers are staggering. So what are jurisdictions doing? They're innovating, and it's exciting. And you have some really exciting innovations in Tennessee. And I put those innovations into two camps. There's this sort of systemic legislative innovation. So states are saying, wow, we're excluding 18-year-olds from the juvenile system. 18-year-olds are in high school. Why would we do that? Let's raise the age. So Vermont's the first state to have done that, right? They're going to go up to the 20th birthday. The law has passed. We have 7 states now contemplating that actively in this next legislative session. You have states to say, we have hybrid systems. We have youthful offender type provisions. Why do we stop? Why can't we do that up to 25? Again, a jurisdiction like DC has embraced that. Parole, we really want to wait 30, 40, 50 years. If someone did something at 19, they're not the same when they're 30 and 35. We know that from our own experiences. We don't even have to look at the research. Let's have a look and see what's going on and how they've matured and developed, right? And And then you see innovations in practices, which is the other bucket. We have specialty courts, you have special probation populations and caseloads. You have special correctional units and say, they're not doing well in the general population. It's traumatizing. They don't have an education. They're not getting mental health care. They're not connecting to their families. We can do better than that, right? We can help prepare them and support them for successful reentry. That's what we all want. And I think the common thread of all these innovations is that we want to improve youth outcomes. Right now, the US system cannot do much worse if it tried, right? Generally speaking. I mean, we've got to do better than that. And when we do that, we increase public safety. And so people say, well, I'm all about public safety. And I say, yeah, so am I. So is everybody. The goal is public safety, but how do you get there? You get there by supporting young people and helping them into that healthy transition into adulthood. That's how you help them. And every single young person goes through these periods of risk taking. That is normal development. The justice system needs to recognize that and approach in a developmentally appropriate way.
Yeah, and I like the model that you're telling us about in Massachusetts. And what are those 7 states? And you said there's 7 states that are.
Yeah, so the states that have been actively looking at raising the age are Massachusetts, Connecticut, Illinois, Nebraska, Colorado, Washington, and California. And there are discussions and task force in other states. But, they're basically saying, what's a sweet spot for the juvenile system? We have a separate system. It is rehabilitative in nature. We're trying to do that, right? The adult system, unfortunately, we don't really embrace rehabilitation, right? It's about deterrence and retribution. But we say, look, these are young people. They're not fully formed. They have a long way to go. They're malleable. They're really malleable, both the bad, right? You could really harm their future, or the good. That's what college is all about, right? It's a pretty safe environment to experiment and grow up is really what it is. It's 4 years of that. Right. But not everyone has that privilege and that opportunity. So I think people are really, it's an exciting moment to reimagine, and it's exciting to see people like Judge Calloway and yourself, innovate in that space. You are in this position. What can I do? And then I think there are folks like Eric and I are thinking about system change. Let's make it so that there's not justice by geography, that a young person in a different state also gets an opportunity.
Right. And what you're saying is phenomenal, because, it's always good to find another model and to get on, the train and the track that others are going in, if it's actually going to work. And so I kudos to those 7 states that are doing that. We're going to keep following them, and whatever best model. I know Judge Calloway is going to find that model, pilot it here in Nashville, and I'm excited about partnering with her to see what can be done in the juvenile, adult, or hybrid space to reimagine some of these issues. But Eric, you have all too well already dealt with this system. You were 17 years old, and you ended up going to jail for 10 years. And, like I said earlier when I introduced you, you're not saying, let's try something new. You're saying, no, we've got to do something new. Why? Not just because of what you experienced, but why do you know all too well that this has to be done, and it has to be done now? It has to be done now. No more conversation, no more thinking about it. We've got to do it now. So Eric, please tell us, why does this have to be done now?
This has to be done now, simply put, because it's a racial justice issue. You've heard some of the moral, scientific, and public policy reasons why this should be done. And I, reiterate that America is the only country in the world that sentences its children to life without the possibility of parole. In a system where African American, Latino, and Hispanic boys are disproportionately overrepresented by these systems. On a personal note, again, I was one of the children who was tried as an adult and placed into the adult prison system. I was a child that had no prior interactions with either system. I was witness to and fought not to fall victim to the rape and other forms of sexual abuse and mental abuse and trauma that young men who have just come of age often experience in county jails across this country. After spending nearly 10 years in that system again, I was released after my third parole hearing. I've been home now for almost 17 years, where I serve as senior advocate here at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, where we lead legislative advocacy campaigns to seek to replace life without the possibility of parole and other extreme penalties for children with age-appropriate accountability that accounts for children's experiences and their unique capacity for change. Again, this has to be done to put an end to the adultification of boys of color in our youth justice system. Children who commit violent crimes are not many adults. A just system has to have some type of proportionality in terms of its sentencing. And when we're looking at children, we have to recognize that children and young people are inherently different from adults, and the sentencing have to be reflective of that fact. Children who commit violence offenses, I think it's in the best interest of that child and the community that we address the underlying issues and begin to heal our communities from the harm that has been done to and caused by its children. So again, I think this has to be done immediately because it's a racial justice issue.
So Judge Calloway, we've heard from Ms. Chester and also Mr. Alexander that it has to be done now. There are other states. I know we're in the South and we're late to the party often here in the state of Tennessee, but Nashville is resilient. Nashville, Davidson County hasn't been late to the party a lot. Sometimes we've been leading the way. Sometimes we've actually been on the front lines of doing it. How quick do you think we can get the constituents and our legislative, our council, and our mayor and our city to wrap their an opportunity around a pilot to see if we can reimagine this juvenile court system, the adult system that we have, and the implications that are handed down in this space?
I have hope for Nashville. I do have a lot of hope for Nashville, and we are the first jurisdiction in Tennessee that has a true restorative justice pre-petition, felony pre-petition project here, and run by Rafa Institute that's going extremely well. And it's those kind of things that we can look at to know that we can truly make a difference. When I look at the numbers that Rafa gives us, when we have youth who are referred not from a petition, but referred prior to even coming to the juvenile court, right after arrest, they're referred to Rafa, and they are felonies. They are felony offenders. And Rafa is able to make sure that they get the services and resources, that they're victim-centered, that they're working with everyone, the community that's involved, and pulling those cases out of the criminal system. Then I have hope that we can continue to do that on a grander scale. When I think about what you're doing, Judge Bell, with the 18 to 30-year-olds and having a restorative response to when they get in trouble. And I know it's not for violent crimes now, but I know that eventually Rafa will extend our juvenile pilot program to also include some violent crimes, as well as I know that you will be able to as well. And once we're able to do that, and we can show by the numbers, by the data, that these children are resilient. All they need is opportunity. All they need is support. All they need is people in their corner showing them how they can do the right way. They are growing. It's just, as Lil said earlier, they are maturing. We all take risks. I remember the things that I used to do, particularly in school as well as college. I won't say too many of them because I think my mom might be on this call and I don't want her to have a heart attack.
I'm so glad you didn't get picked up with one of your friends in the car.
Hallelujah. Praise God. And it was by the grace of God that there are many of things that I easily could have been locked up for that did not happen. And every youth has that opportunity to grow from that. I look at the work that happened with Centoya Brown is not the only person in Eric Alexander, Ron Johnson. I could name a number of our our community members who are doing extremely well in our community because they were given that chance. There are so many of our youth who are in prison right now who absolutely can make a difference and make a good impression on everything that they do in our community. And we as a community are not giving them the opportunity. So I thank you like for programs like Lipscomb here in Nashville that's sponsoring a program for women in the women's prison that are giving them an opportunity to get their degrees. Nashville is primed for doing these things. You know, it's going to unfortunately take some cooperation from the state as well to make a big change in the way that we do our juvenile system. We are trying. We have some legislature who are on our in favor and working each and every legislature cycle to try and bring in some laws and pass some things that are going to help youth and to help our system to make differences. We got a long way to go with the state, but I know that Nashville is here to lead the way in those efforts.
Okay, and so Eric, you know, while Judge Calloway was talking, I thought that, I don't know if you've been asked this question, I'm sure you have, but if you could have sentenced yourself when you were 17, with the work you've done now and what you are working towards now, what sentence or what punishment or what consequence or what would you have yourself gone through at 17 if you were able to sentence yourself? What would you have said would have been the right consequence or not? Because it looked like you were really in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what would you have done if you could wave magic wand and we could create this system right now? The young Eric, 17 years old, who's hanging out with a friend that just says, "Hey, just watch out. I'm gonna go get us some beer." And he goes to get the beer and then he shoots the clerk and you're like, "Oh my God, what happened? I didn't know we were doing all of that." You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. What would you have the court system, the judge, what would you have said would have been appropriate if another young Eric had that situation happen to him now?
Thank you for that question. I think what would have been appropriate for me, a child that had not had any encounter with the juvenile justice system, some type of trauma-informed counseling. You know, what has this child experienced that placed him in a situation and a position where he was able to break the law? And you know, after that, restorative sessions. You know, for a child who had just witnessed a life taken. You know, something within me needed to be restored at that time because I had never witnessed anything like that. So I was traumatized on top of being traumatized. So again, some type of trauma-informed counseling for these children. And then, you know, if there was a need to keep me housed in some form of a facility, you know, I would say take another look at me at the age of 21, since I was so close to the age of 18. You know, make sure that you know, the education you know, process was you know, continued. But you know, for me, instead, I was thrown you know, in jail at the age of 17, you know, without finishing high school, a senior in high school, and just say, you know, to heck with you. You know, right in here, if you don't accept a plea that will you know, keep you from getting a life without parole sentence. So you know, again, so, you know, trauma-informed counseling should be in place for these children who commit the type of crimes that I was involved in. So I would say that would have been appropriate.
Okay. Ms. Chester, if we were to just take one model right now and say, we're going to pilot it next week, what will we have to do to get, like Judge Calloway said, the state, the council, the city, the mayor, the county, the constituents, and everybody say, okay, you know, because I'm gonna be honest, you know, in Nashville and all across the country, youth crime is up. You know, when we were kids, it was just a little fight, you know, the you know, yo mama, and then we go play, you know, later. But now, you know, there's it's a lot of violent crimes that are happening. So there's gonna be some pushback, right? But how do we get the community to reimagine like you said, there's no magic wand. There's no magic wand. How do we get the community to reimagine what they were imagining in the 1800s? How do we get them to reimagine and kind of start over? We need to start over. How do we do that?
Yeah, not easy, but well worth the effort and the work, right? Without a doubt, these are our neighbors, our family, our community. This is our future to the U.S., right? So I think some of it is education. I think a lot of criminal justice policy is developed with myths. I think you look at the 90s, hard on crime, adult crime, adult time. We were like full of slogans, right? It was like the land of slogans. But what makes, if a 10-year-old is involved in a very serious offense and there's a tragedy, what makes that 10-year-old an adult? Nothing, right? Nothing. So you have to meet the person where they're at, right? So if you want to be effective, and we all want an effective justice. We want a fair system and effective system. It's both unfair and ineffective to be sweeping children into an adult system. That makes no sense. Even before we had the research, people knew that made no sense. And so I think we have to, try to help people. They get caught up in the moment. A lot of people legislate in one case, and there are cases and there are tragedies. I'm not, do not take that away, right? But what would we want if it was our own child? I want to hold my kids accountable. I want them, but I want them to learn and to move on. I want them to try to restore a harm that's happened. Right. But the justice system is so developmentally inappropriate. I remember when I was a young lawyer, the first time I was representing, I was both doing prosecution and defense. I represented, a young child, and right, I gave the lawyerly talk, you cannot talk to your parents about this. There's no parent privilege. You can only talk to me, and you can never, I don't want you to ever confess, we need to sort this out. I mean, right, all the instincts as a parent is, I want you to tell the truth. I want you to be forthright right away, right? Like those are the things we actually want to teach youth. And the system is exactly contrary to that. So yes, we want to protect their legal rights. We get it wrong sometimes. We try the wrong person, we arrest the wrong person. We've got to protect people's legal rights. But we have to also recognize that they're kids, they're changing. I don't want to be judged with what I did when I was 19 ever. I don't want to be labeled by the thing I'm most embarrassed by. I don't want that to be my label for life, right? We need to recognize the reality that people change, and we need to embrace that and support them. We still hold them accountable. This is not, sometimes people think this is somehow kind of a free pass. There's no free pass here. And dealing and living with something you've done that you deeply, deeply regret is a tough thing to do. But we also want people to move on. They're people's children, their brothers, their sisters, their parents. They're part of our community, and they can offer so much. So so that's a lot. It shows my passion. I think it's getting out there, getting the voices, having people with life experience. This is a big stigma. Having people be willing to talk about it and share. The fact Eric is sharing his life, no one's asked me to share the things I don't want to share, right? I mean, this is a huge ask. It's incredibly courageous, but it is what actually changes people's minds.
So, do you mind if I add in on that?
Oh no, I was about to ask you, because you're so focused on restorative justice, and you had a TED talk, and you were saying, how can we just look at forgiveness, right? And so, yeah, just kind of like, I was about to send it right back to you. So yes, please add to that.
I want to talk about what Ms. Chester said when she started, and literally from the question that you asked when you said something about youth crime increasing. And that again is like exactly what Ms. Chester said, is that we develop policies and laws based on myths. And there is this myth, particularly in Davidson County, and I think in all of Tennessee, that youth crime is always rising. And it is absolutely not. And we have, since I started in our as the judge in 2014, I've been very careful about keeping absolute good stats, so that when people say, well, youth crime is rising, what are you doing about it? It is absolutely not. In 2013, there were 4,715 youth who were arrested for any type of crime. In 2019, that number was 2,431. So it's almost a 50% decrease in the arrest. And then since that time, COVID had a lot to do with that because, we've been at home. We haven't been able to go out as much, and there hasn't been as much issues. But the number is now lower 60%. So we are 60% down in youth crime. Now, what happens is, and there is absolutely a myth that the crimes that are happening are more serious now than they were ever before, or the crimes that are happening, the younger children. That's not true either. We've had younger children that have been caught up in major crimes for a long period of time. And so what happens is you get a news story about a youth that's been involved in some type of murder case. And all of a sudden the community says, oh my God, juvenile court's not doing their job. Youth crime is on a rise. But if you look at it, the last murder case was literally 6 months ago. And in between that, there've been like 50 murders that have nothing to do with youth. And so we hear one story about a youth crime that's very serious, and we all automatically think we got to start locking up all these kids. We got to lock up these kids because they're just out killing people. It's a myth. It doesn't happen. And what we have been able to show is the more restorative that we've been, the more rehabilitative services that we've given to the youth, the more crime has gone down. The least that you lock up, the more that you work on in the community, the better safety you have for the entire community. And so we have to remember, these kids need love. They need structure. They need support. Locking them up in adult facilities, and even most of our juvenile facilities in our state, doesn't give them that. And what it does, it gives them more trauma. It gives them more adverse childhood experiences. It gives them absolutely a worse chance to have their brains develop more effectively during the time period that we need to be giving them that support and that love. And so we've got to erase these myths. When anybody ever says to you, youth crime is crazy high, you tell them, show me the numbers that show that. Show me the numbers. And if once we see the numbers, then we can deal with it at that point.
And so I'm glad that you said that, because that's what I was asking Ms. Chester. When you try to pivot and you try to reimagine, you have pushback and you have all of these myths and you have all of these things that people are saying that are not true. And so, yes, the data speaks for itself. It's showing that youth crime is down. It is showing that violent crimes are down. It is okay for us to reimagine. And so that I'm very glad that you gave us that information, Judge Calloway, because that is true. The pushback is always a myth. The pushback is always, we can't do this because of this. And it's always about one case or two cases, but not looking at the holistic and the larger picture. The larger picture, and Ms. Chester, you said it yesterday when we were prepping, that if we can get an individual not to have a felony by the time they're, I think you said 30, then we're really getting ourselves as a community, like you said, Judge Calloway, on down the road, a very, very healthy community, and not continue to put people in this situation. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. And so, Eric, here's a question. What is the value and importance of impacted persons informing and leading this work? What is the value and importance of impacted persons informing and leading this work? Because you dealt with it. It's so much good. It's always good to have people at the table instead of people that haven't experienced anything, trying to figure out how we figure it out without having somebody who's actually dealt with it. How important is having somebody like you that've experienced it, having a seat at the table?
Well, I'll start off saying this. Over 700 children who were told that they would die in prison are now home around the country. Over 140 plus of those men and women are active within the ICANN network. All of them, plus myself, serve time for homicide-related offenses and are now home living positive, productive lives. Some as elementary school teachers, substance abuse counselors, paralegals, entrepreneurs. They're all contributing to their community in a variety of positive ways. We went inside with the understanding that we could never repay what we took. And with that in mind, we began to consciously decide to spend our time in prison finding means to repay society for the mistakes that we made. We are not monsters. Yes, we made critical errors in our judgment as adolescents, but we are more than the worst thing that we've done. And with that said, when someone like myself who's able to come home with, a sense of quote unquote redemption, or who has been redeemed, society at large has to be able to address the very myths that you guys talked about, that these individuals are monsters, they are these horrific people that should never be released from prison. But when they're able to meet someone like myself, when the lines of proximity are crossed, and people are able to interact with each other, they see that we are normal citizens. And that's why youth who commit violent offenses should be centered and lead this work, so that those myths can be defeated and denied, so that individuals can see that these people are normal individuals. Yes, they committed an infraction that they needed to be punished for, but they are people who are capable of coming back to society and contributing in very positive ways. So this is the value, and this is why they should be front and center. So society can see, and these healing relationships can then begin to be formed.
Yeah, and I know all too well, and I know Judge Calloway and also Ms. Chester and Mr. Alexander. It's always good to have somebody at the table that has exactly experienced what we're trying to see. We can reimagine and then we can fix. And so thank you again for your work. Thank you for being willing to share, like Ms. Chester said, the traumatic experience that you had, because it will be individuals like you, returning citizens, that will help this work move forward. And then Judge Calloway, you're right. Okay, so now we give them the data, now we give them the stats, we correct the myths, we clean the slate and say, okay, what y'all thought is wrong. Now we got a new issue. Victims. Okay. We've taken care of all the thoughts, but now the victims. How do we deal with making sure that the sentencing reform also is going to address the needs of the victims? And now I know you're going to say, restitution, making them whole, peace circle meetings, all that good stuff. But what is it? How do we get the victims to say, okay, I'm gonna give this young adult, this young child, this child another chance? Restorative justice. I'm gonna be a part of that. How do we make the victims feel comfortable with reimagining this system?
So again, we start with the premise that victims are taken care of in the normal criminal justice system. And we start with the myth that people who go as victims in the criminal justice process are a part of the system, when people who work in the system know that that's not true. What we know, if you're a victim in a crime that goes through the normal criminal justice process, a settlement, a criminal trial, the prosecutor may ask you if you agree with the initial settlement offer or whatever it is, but that's pretty much the only part you have in it, other than being a witness. And if you are a witness and you had a savvy public defender like District Attorney your Don Deaners of the world, who are going to say, when you say, I don't know, I'm so upset by this, I'm going to object, because the fact that you're upset by what has happened to you doesn't have anything to do with the elements of the crime, right? And so as a prosecutor, it is the state versus so-and-so. It's not victim so-and-so versus defendant. It is the state versus defendant. And so as the prosecutor, your role is to prove the state's case that this person committed a crime, or that a crime was committed and that this person did it beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not, well, how does the victim feel about this crime? That has nothing to do with it. And so when you hear people on the news and say, I just want justice, I want justice, I always ask, well, what is justice to you? That doesn't get answered in the criminal justice system, But if you look at a system that is more about that is more victim centered and is more about let's heal everybody that's involved, then you have a better opportunity to be at the table for a victim than you ever would in a typical United States criminal justice system way. And so it is so important to know that systems who have restorative justice projects or restorative justice programs, their victim satisfaction rate is over the top high. It's like 95 and above compared to what your victim satisfaction rate is in the criminal justice system. And you think of the worst cases. Let's, talk about a death penalty case that's going to linger on for years and years and years. And even if the death penalty isn't overturned, a couple of times, at the end of the day, when the family of the person who was killed says, do you feel justice? Well, how can they say yes? They've been dragged through this criminal process for many years. And in the end, there's nothing to be satisfied about. You get that opportunity of satisfaction when you're in a restorative justice type of program.
Yeah, and so, I will just take a couple of minutes of personal, privilege on being the moderator. Judge Calloway and I, when I was running for judge back in 2012, we've known each other for a long time. And when she got elected in 2014, I said, hey, what about this hybrid court? How can we, use juvenile jurisdiction and adult jurisdiction? How can we figure something out? And we've been both talking about it. And I applied for a grant with the Tennessee Supreme Court, and we were able to receive a technical assistance grant for problem-solving court, working for the Center for Court Innovation. And we did, in fact, launch the first state of Tennessee's diversionary court called CARE, Creating Avenues for Restoration and Empowerment. And it's for ages 18 to 30. And it's victim and offender participant centered. The victim tells us what they want. They sign off on the agreement for the individual to come into the court. There's peace circle meetings. The victim may want 4 hours of cleanup. The victim definitely wants whatever, if something was stolen or if something was vandalized, they want that repaired. But they also want to feel some kind of satisfaction. And you are right. 95% of victims that participate in the resolve, the problem solving piece of resolving the issue, fare well. And so this is one of the first restorative courts that we do have looking at the cognitive ability of individuals. And so looking at that model is definitely moving in the right direction. And so we've got one more question from Ms. Chester. The innovation within states is very exciting, which is very true. So it's always good to find a model and then implement it in your own state. And you can make people feel comfortable that way. They're doing it in Chicago. They're doing it in Massachusetts. They're doing it in DC. Why can't we do it in Nashville? I know we can do it in Nashville. But does this recommend the system of federalism? Do you worry about the federal government getting too involved when we try to change some legislation when we're trying to do restorative justice practices?
Yeah, interesting question. We have this interesting separation of power issue in the United States, right? The feds can't really tell states what to do on criminal justice. They can bribe them. So the classic example is the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act, right? Which says to states, hey, if you want federal money, you need to do 4 things, right? You need to collect data around racial disparities and address any disparities. Every state has that problem, right? You need to decriminalize status offenses. Don't throw in people who are, running away, sometimes for reasons that, we think later, well, that was probably a good response or as a natural response, right? Or whatever, right? We're not going to treat them as if they committed a crime. It's going to be a different kind of response. So what the federal government does is says, you do what you're going to do, state, but here you go. If you want these federal funds, that's not a bad approach, right? And so I can imagine we have a new administration coming in. We don't know yet who's going to have what positions. There haven't been all the appointments made. But we have a justice system that cares about the federal system, that puts a lot of money into research, looks at best practices, tries to help with innovations. I think this is an amazing opportunity if the feds wanted to say, we've been kind of narrow-minded of our definition of youth. And we haven't really been applying the research, which frankly, some of the federal government has helped pay for, which shows that children aren't many adults. Let's apply the research to practice and innovation. It would be up to the states. I mean, the feds do prosecute and sentence, but that's a very small percentage compared to what states are doing. And so the states they're the labs of experimentation, right? Without a doubt, which is terrific. But I also think there could be a positive role. It doesn't all have to be negative, that the federal government could do. We saw death penalty. We saw a man right at the end of the last administration being put to death for a crime he committed as an emerging adult. And, someday there's going to be a constitutional challenge to that. There is no magic birthday. So if you're 18 in one day, that doesn't make you an adult. But that's where the federal government can play a leadership role. And certainly it'd be great if they would put some money into research so that these innovations have outcome evaluations, great, robust outcome evaluations that can help persuade people that these innovations are working and we need to apply them elsewhere.
So I know we only have about 3 minutes, but this is a good question. Is it realistic? And I'm just going to open it up, and don't y'all all fight over the question to answer it. But is it realistic to think that we might be able to revisit life sentences given to youth? Do you think we can review who they are now, still incarcerated, and allow them to be restored to society if they've just demonstrated their positive character now? And I know, Eric, you mentioned a little bit, when you were 17 and you were in custody, you wanted them to reevaluate you when you were 21. Maybe I'll throw it to you first, and Judge Calloway, if you'll chime in after Eric, that'd be great. What about, you said when you were 17, after you had served, 4 years, you would have liked for them to reevaluate what was going on with you when you were 21.
Yes, first I'll start off by answering the question very directly. It is very realistic that, we can address and change this. Across the country, over 24 states have, abolished life without parole for children, or, they no longer use it, and that includes the District of Columbia. So yeah, again, children are different from adults in the sense that, they have very little lived life experience. So, there's not a whole lot for them to draw on. So, the trajectory of change and you're becoming a different person, the ceiling is higher for children, because they're looking to be and do something else. So, and taking a second look at this person, within 2 or 3 years after their offense, to see how, this person is, emerging within the system, is the incarceration helping them, really help. Other than that, you're just doing it for the extreme purpose of punishment and punishment alone. There's very little rehabilitation in the process. So yes, these sentences should be revisited and, allow these, individuals to have second chances to show that they are worthy of coming back into society.
Just Calloway.
Yeah, I am hopeful that we can make some changes in legislation. Tennessee is, as Eric said earlier, is super far behind. We still have on the books that even though the federal government and the Supreme Court has said that you can't have children do life sentences without possibly parole, our life sentences are effectively life sentences without possibility of parole. That case is being argued. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
And can I add, Judge Calloway, that Tennessee has the highest scheme in the country at 51 years for children. No other country, no other state in the country is that high.
And, we're excited, hopefully excited. We have a case that's up now that's going to be heard next week to address that issue and to see if we can get a ruling specifically that says Tennessee law is unconstitutional, but by the way that they sentence our youth to 51 calendar years. We have been active since I have started in 2015. I started in 2014. We've been active since 2015, working with particular legislature of changing the law for juveniles at least adding a period of time where their case can be reviewed if they are given a lengthy sentence. We started off at 15 years for a new review. Through negotiations, it went up to about 30, and it was close to passing last year at 30. That's still a lot, and still something that you can't be extremely excited about, but it's better than what we have now. And so we'll, if we have to take it off bits and bits by pieces as we go, I'm fine with that, because I know that every child that I've seen that comes in front of me does not deserve to be in prison until they die.
Yeah. And so, like you said, you've got to just chip pieces, chip away as we keep chipping away, and pass the torch to somebody else, let them keep chipping away. We'll get there. I believe that we are no longer trying, we are doing the work. And as we're doing the work, we're trying, but doing the work, but not trying to do the work. So, meet people where they are. Y'all are doing some phenomenal work. Judge Calloway, continue to lead the way. Mr. Alexander, thank you for making your voice heard and amplifying it by bringing your own chair if they don't give you a seat at the table like Shirley Chisholm, or already having a seat at the table. And Ms. Chester, thank you for your phenomenal work and what you're doing across this country and this world. And I know that the best is yet to come with you coming to Nashville and helping Judge Calloway.
I'm coming.
It's a court order. It's a court order. I will hold you in contempt. I'm the adult judge, so I have jurisdiction over you.
I'm there.
But anyway, no, it's a labor of love. We're so happy that you will be coming to try to give us some best practices and ways that we can try to reimagine the new movement and new horizons. But I know Eric Ritter is going to come back on. He has some lasting thoughts for us. But thank you for allowing me to moderate this conversation. Judge Calloway, I look forward to continuing to work with you as we pilot these projects here and in the city of Nashville, and see what the best is always yet to come. So we are doing the work, not going to just try anymore. So we're going to take from Barack Obama, yes, we can, and yes, we will. And so looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in many months and years to come with the work. Mr. Ritter, turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Judge Bell. So as we're getting ready to finish this conversation, I'd like to let everybody know just a few things. One is that we will be having a third panel, the creative imagination and the future of justice systems. We'll be focused there, working with artists. That date will not be next week, but it will be in the coming weeks. We'll keep you updated. And as you're leaving, please consider leaving a memento in the chat. We're going to take those mementos and create a monument from this conversation so we can keep the work going. Thank you to everybody for being here, and please be in touch. I think everybody here wants to hear from everybody.
All right. So as Mr. Ritter said, if you'll just put any lasting thoughts, or what do you feel moved to do? We would love to have that in the chat. On Facebook, if you want to go on and put that in there as well. They're definitely going to chronicle this information and put it in their archives. We want to continue this work, and the best is yet to come. Nashville hasn't seen nothing yet. I know this work is going to get done, and Judge Calloway is going to continue to lead the way in reimagining new opportunities. And, I would like to say that I believe that our city leaders, our district attorney, and our public defender are all looking at ways we can reimagine. And so we're all ready to get the work done. We just need a Miss Chester in our toolkit. So looks like she said yes. And so I'm looking forward to it. All right, Mr. Ritter.
Maybe can we give everybody just one more minute to finish that memento and then close it off?
Sure. So we'll just say 2 minutes. So 1:13 is 1:11 right now. So 1:13 sounds great.
Judge Bell, any last parting words for us?
Well, always, when you take a a look at your purpose in life and your tools and the gift that you've been given in life. If you can connect yourself to something that is beyond what you can even think or imagine, you should do it. And this panel is definitely doing that. Eric, the unfortunate circumstances that you went through allowed us to now have a person like you to help us reimagine, refocus what can be done. Judge Calloway, you sacrificing yourself to serve in a public role in public office, to do the work is phenomenal. And Ms. Chester, being a change agent and continue to move the needle and push the agenda and the envelope forward across this country is great. And so I'm just happy to be in the midst of seeing awesome opportunities to be able to move forward in this space. It is time that we reimagine. It is time that we look at a new way of doing things. It is time that there will be new horizons and a new outlook in how we handle humans and people, and always the plight of people is what's most important. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this work get done. And I am the squeaky wheel, Ms. Chester. So, and Judge Calloway will let you know, you're gonna get tired of hearing from me. But Judge Calloway is holding it down. So we're looking forward to seeing what Nashville can do, what Nashville not can do, what Nashville will do in this space. So again, I always lead it with, we are leading the way, following the way. She's leading the way, we're following the way with Judge Calloway. And so thank you for your labor of love and your work. And Rafa Institute, thank you for being the partner for this important work while they're piloting this here in the city of Nashville, and changing the trajectory, the myth, correcting people with their thoughts as we move forward, and giving them the right stats, the right data, and now the right tools to be able to move forward with reimagining this juvenile, I wouldn't even call it it's the justice system, but justice is supposed to stream down, like Martin Luther King said, like mighty streams. And mighty streams means it's supposed to knock you over in having access to healthcare, access to education, access to opportunities, access to living life, and happiness, and all those things, and being in pursuit of it. So ending with that, it's Martin Luther King, it's Black History Month, so we got to throw something in. But justice is streamed down like mighty streams, and I think this panel is definitely doing that. So that is my lasting words.